you've ever wondered what the best KitchenAid mixer is, well, over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you. Now, there are a lot of variables that go into choosing the right KitchenAid mixer for you. Everything from your baking style, the style of the machine itself, all the way up to the height of your cabinets, right? Because if your cabinets hang too low, you're not going to be able to get one of these taller ones underneath it. We're going to discuss it all. Now, the first thing that we're going to get into here is all of the different models, because they have a ton of them. We're going to get into the specs, you know, the quart sizes of each bowls, what they come with, things like that. Then we're going to actually get into the mechanics of the machine. You know, we're going to get inside, take a look. I'll show you what each motor system and transmission system looks like, some of the problems that each, model faces. Now, my goal with this video is to make sure that you are an informed buyer. I want you to know everything about these machines so you have no questions when it comes to ordering your machine. Speaking of machines, every machine on this table is available for sale. Actually, we have quite an inventory. Look at that. We have a whole bunch of professional 600s and some 7-quart Pro lines over there as well. Now, there are a little bit of difference between machines that you would get from us and machines that you would get from KitchenAid. We actually go through these machines, do a quality assurance check, and add a whole bunch of different upgrades that don't come on traditional machines. For example, the spring-in washer here, right? This is installed on the K5SS. It came installed on all the older tilt head models, but in about 2016 or thereabout, on the tilt head models, they went ahead and removed those. So there's no longer a spring here on the agitator shaft. And then they also never came on the professional 600 Pro 5 Plus models of machine. We add them to those as well. Now, after the video, if you are interested in taking a look at some of those upgrades that we do, check out our website, mrmixer.store. All right, let's get started. Now, I do want to touch on my credibility real quick, just so you can make sure that, I am the right person to be informing you. I have repaired thousands of these mixers. In fact, here's one giant tub of parts that we've changed. This thing probably has 1,000 parts in it. Now, this here is just my garage where I'm filming. Let me take you over to my shop. As you can see, we do have a storefront here in Augusta, Kansas. Let's go in and see where the magic happens. Taste the freaking rainbow. Look at this table right here. Now, this is full of machines that have been shipped to us from all over the US. In fact, behind it there, all of these boxes right here are machines that have been shipped to us that we just haven't got to. And we got Brett over here. Brett is employee numero uno. Check this out. He's got a machine right now on his table that he's working on. Then we got Jacob over here. This is my business partner. He's over here taking some inventory. Yeah. Now, we always have on hand a huge inventory of parts because we're doing so many repairs. And well, needless to say, we have another giant inventory of mixers over here as well that are for sale. So now that you know that I know what I'm talking about, let's head back to the garage and we'll take a look at all those different models. All right, first on deck, we have the Tilt Head series. That is comprised of the Classic, the Ultra Power, and the Artisan. Now, the only other one that I don't have on the table right now would be the Classic Plus, which is basically the same thing as the Classic. I believe it has 25 more watts of power in the motor. Now, all of these machines are going to be essentially the same exact machine. There's just a few caveats to it, like the Classic has 250 watts of power. The Ultra Power has 300, and then the Artisan comes in at 325. Now, all of the internal components on these machines are basically exactly the same. All of the gears, all the electronics, they use the same parts across all of these generations here. So all of the variations of the tilt head machines that are not the Artisan are going to have a 4.5 quart bowl, where the Artisan actually comes with a 5 quart bowl. Well, that's one of the biggest selling factors of the Artisan, is that it actually does have a little bit more quart capacity in the bowl. All of the attachments are actually interchangeable between these machines. Not only the actual, paddle, hook, and whisk, but also the external attachments like the meat grinder and the ice cream maker and things like that, all compatible between all of these units. Now, the cool thing is, if you wanted to, you can actually take a 5 quart bowl from an Artisan and put it on any of the other tilt heads. They're all going to fit just the same. The only difference is that the 5 quart is just about that much taller than the 4.5 quart. The only difference. Now, the other big selling factor of the Artisan here is, the options of colors, right? The Classic and the Classic Plus and the Ultra Power, they only come in like white, gray, black, and maybe like red, to where the Artisan comes in a wide array of colors. I think they have like 38 different colors to choose from. All right, I'm going to take this Artisan apart. I'm going to show you how it works mechanically, some of the pros and cons of this machine, but there's one more selling factor that I want to touch on before we go there. And that would be cabinet height, from the base of the counter to the bottom of your cabinet here, right? Oh, there's one of the fancy colors that I was talking about. That is Aqua Sky. It's like a Tiffany blue color. But anyways, so from the counter up to your cabinet, you need to measure that, because these tilt head machines are 14.5 inches tall. Now, as you can tell, the bowl raise machines are a little bit taller. They actually come in at 16.5 inches. So for some of you, that is going to be a limiting factor. If you don't have at least 17 inches of space between your counter and the bottom of your cabinets, you're just going to have to go with the tilt head. Now, the 16.5 inch height is actually standard between all of the different bowl raise machines. So no matter what style of bowl raise you choose, That's just the counter space you're going to need. Now you might be asking yourself, why am I taking apart a brand new machine rather than one of these older ones here? Well, that's because I'm going to actually upgrade this one too. Kill two birds with one stone. Now, one of the better features of the tilt heads is that their planetary is actually held in place by a pin, and we'll show you why that comes into play a little bit later. All right, we're going to go ahead and remove this back cap right here. That's going to reveal all the electronics that are in the rear end. So here is the tail end of the Artisan, which, as I said, is going to be the exact same as the Classic and the Ultra Power. Any version of the tilt head is going to look exactly like this. So you have a speed control plate here in the rear end. Behind that is a little governor, and then there's a bearing bracket in here that connects to. And then down here, how this works is you go ahead and when you put it into speed, you can see this little lever right here. You see it start to poke out? Okay, so take a look. Whenever you put this into gear, there's a little tab right here. And when you put it into gear, you see it drops down and makes contact. That's what turns the machine on. That's what starts the circuit. Now to show off the motor and the internal gears, we're actually gonna have to take out a few more screws here. We got these planetary screws, there's 5 of those, and then body screws as well. There's 2 here, 1 in the back over here, 1 in the back over there. Then we're actually gonna split this head in half. All right, we have this mixer head torn down, and this is what we are left with. All right, so over here we have the upper housing. What the upper housing is comprised of is all of those electronics that I showed you earlier in the rear end. This is the field assembly, and then there's a motor armature right there that you can see down there. It runs through the back of the machine as well. When you turn the machine on, this is the drive shaft gear, the main drive. So that thing engages, it spins, and it actually connects to the top of this gear right here, which is called the worm gear. Now, this is the worm gear assembly. Let's take a look. Like you see how when I spin this gear, it ends up turning this lower gear as well, which is called the center gear. This is that worm gear assembly. This is how that works. So, you know, we have the motor gear running a drive input into this worm gear tower here, which spins this gear, thus turning this lower pinion shaft gear, which then connects to the center gear and turns the whole unit. Now, when we get into the mechanics of this machine, this is where it's going to come into, is this the right machine for me, based on what you're going to be making. Now, as you can see, this worm gear right here is plastic. Now, I say plastic, but it's made out of a nylon Kevlar. It's a very, very strong plastic, but it is designed to be a fail point on the machine, just in case you get your hand caught down in there, you drop a utensil into the bowl or something. What it does is it strips that gear out before it blows up the rest of the transmission and the motor. It's just a fail-safe gear. Now, some people believe that, you know, this gear used to be made with metal back in the day. It never was. Now, this looks like metal because it's black, but this is actually just pure nylon here. Still a very, very sturdy gear, but they never actually made this worm gear out of metal. It's always been, originally it was like a very dense fiber, then it was the nylon, and then it was the nylon Kevlar. Now, since these tilt heads do have a plastic gear, they're not well equipped to handle a bunch of heavy doughs. That's not saying that they can't mix dough, but you know, one of the biggest problems that we see is people overload their machine, they put way too much dough in there, and it just ends up stripping out that worm gear. So all of the other gears in this machine are actually made out of metal. This is the most common fail point in here. Those metal gears, very rarely are we seeing those broken or worn. Now let's discuss a few other little problem areas with these tilt head machines. One of which is this lock lever right here. Now sometimes through vibration, this screw will actually loosen itself up, and then what will happen is even though you do have that engaged, when you put pressure on the front or it's mixing something heavy, it'll actually kick that lock out and it'll bounce up and down like this. Now also on occasion, they have the tendency for this screw to back itself out as well. Now you can see that thing is spring loaded, right? And so what'll happen is when this screw backs itself out through vibration, sometimes it'll allow the machine, if it's plugged in, to kick into gear, right? You turn it in the off, but this spring will hold tension and pop it into gear, and you just won't be able to shut it off unless you unplug it. Again, none of these issues are deal breakers. None of them happen on every single machine. It basically just depends on how well the machine is treated, whether it's abused or not. And they're not hard problems to fix. Let me show you. So with both of these set screws here loosening up through vibration, it really is just a matter of getting back in here with a Phillips head, tightening those back down, and that basically will generally fix both of those issues. Now, before we put the tilt head back together, let's go ahead and move into and discuss the Kitchenaid Heavy Duty, or the K5SS. Now, this K5SS right here is a descendant of the K5A, which is widely revered as the best machine ever made. But the problem is, they actually quit manufacturing the K5A in 1978, and they moved to the K5SS, which the SS stands for solid state. And basically, it's just updated electronics. If you get into the rear end of some of those older machines, the parts are different, the electronical components are different, everything's spliced and wire netted together. There's not like quick clips to connect all the power supplies and things like that. So the K5SS is no longer available for purchase new, but they are all over the place. I mean, they sold millions of these things over the years that they were in production, so you can find them all over on eBay and Marketplace and things like that. Now, not to count out all of the other mixers that we have already discussed and that we will discuss, but this right here is my favorite model. They just seem to be very, very sturdy. They run into very few problems. Let's look. So first off, identifying the K5SS. Okay, so any machine that has a head that looks like a tilt head, and it has a removable back cap like this, and it has mounting bolts that mount this housing to the neck, is going to be a K5SS, or what we refer to as a K5SS. Now, for marketing purposes, they made like a bajillion different models of the same exact machine, right? They have the K5SS, they have the KSM5, they have the KM50, there's like several different variations of this machine. They're all essentially the exact same thing. So I actually won't even be bothering taking this apart because actually once you split this head, it's the exact same transmissions, the gears, the motor, everything is exactly the same. The only thing that's different is the way that this mounts to the neck here. So the lower housing is a little bit different, right? So instead of having the tilt function and the tilt pin that runs through it, it's just solid. It mounts directly into the base here. Now what I like about that is it gives the reliability of the tilt head, but you run into a lot less issues because there's just less moving parts and functions to it like the tilt head has. So the K5SS does generally seem to be, like I said, one of the more sturdier machines. You know, we do see a lot of these for repair, but a lot of them have lasted people 20 and 30 years before they have to send them into the repair. So it's a win. And since it uses the same gear and motor and electronics as the tilt heads, parts will always be available for this as well, even though they're out of production. Now, if you are interested in the K5SS, like I said, you can't get them new, but we do have some available if you're interested. I'm going to go ahead and throw this tilt head back together, show you some of the upgrades that we put on these machines, and then we'll touch on which machine is best for you based on your baking practices. Then we'll move on to the professionals. As we're putting it back together, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all of these old body screws, and we're going to replace those. So one thing you will notice, out of the 4 body screws that we removed, only one of them has a lock washer. So what we do is we actually replace those. We don't like the square head bits. We go back to a Phillips head and we put a lock washer on each one of these. So instead of 1, there's 4 lock washers holding this thing down in place. Now the reason we do this is just like these 2 set screws for the lock lever and the speed lever. Sometimes vibration can cause these to back themselves out and fall away from the machine. So that's why we just go ahead and upgrade those. Now to prevent some of that vibration that's harmful to this machine, we actually have manufactured these. These are our pedestal anti-slip, anti-vibration mats. Basically keeps your machine from slipping around on the counter. It's going to help prevent it from walking. And then just this layer, it's a 1/16 silicone, and this layer is just going to provide a vibration reduction. So we do offer these in several different colors. We got the black, white, red, and the gray down there. And they just go a long ways to help protect your machine, and they are a one-size-fit-all, so they fit all the different models. So the next thing we've done here is completely disassembled this planetary here. And the reason we do that is so that we can add a spring and washer to the agitator shaft. And just like that, this machine is now better than new, but there is one more upgrade that we do. And that would be to raise the head of the mixer up like this, locate this screw in the neck, and we are going to remove that. Now, reason being is sometimes from factory and sometimes just from vibration, it is set too low or it wiggles itself in. And even when you have it locked, there's a lot of head play, so the head will bounce up and down really bad while you're trying to mix. Now, allowing the head of your mixer to bounce up and down like that can absolutely thrash your machine, but it can also damage your paddles as well. Let me show you. So if your head has a lot of play, it definitely means that that paddle is coming into contact with the bottom of the bowl. You hear that? Now this means that the attachments are actually riding the bottom of the bowl. You see all the chipping of the enamel on this paddle. That is what happens when you allow that paddle to just ride the bottom of the bowl. It just absolutely tears them up. That is okay because we have a very simple solution. So we have removed that beater adjustment screw, and we're going to get what is called the Everdyne. This is a little product that I invented. Now what we're going to do here is actually slide the screw through the Everdyne, just like that. And then we go ahead and reinstall that screw. You can see the Everdyne is on there. It's very low profile. You can hardly even tell. If we put a paddle on the machine, we're going to throw a dime into the bottom of the bowl here and lower the head down. Now the goal here is to adjust this screw so that when you do lower the head down, you put it into the lock position, that this paddle just barely passes over that dime and just gives it a little flick on every rotation. Now this is going to do a few things for you. Basically what it does is it makes sure that the attachment is just that high off the bottom of the bowl. This is going to make sure that there's not any unincorporated ingredients from the paddle being too high and passing over, but it's also going to prevent your paddles from scraping the bottom and chipping the enamel off. Oh, did I mention it essentially erases any and all of that head bounce? All in all, just a quick, simple upgrade that really extends the life of your machine. Now, how do you know if any of these machines are the right one for you? Well, let's dive into that a little bit. So first is going to be capacity. Now, there's really no difference in the capacity of these two machines. The K5SS, the 5 in the K5SS dictates that it is a 5-quart bowl. The Artisan also has a 5-quart bowl. And then, the Classic Plus, the Ultra Power have a 4.5-quart bowl. Now, there's not a whole lot of difference in a half-quart capacity, so it's not going to, make or break either way. What I would say about that is if you do have a family of, 6 or 8 people, 5-quart probably isn't going to be enough. You're probably going to have to move into the 6 or 7-quart machines that I'll show you here in just a minute. But if you only have yourself or 2 or 3 or 4 people in your family, any of these machines are going to suffice. Next, let's talk about your actual baking style. Now, if you're just going to be doing icings, frostings, cupcakes, cookies, cake batters, things that are very light in nature and don't put a ton of strain on the machine, all of these tilt heads are going to be absolutely perfect for you. You won't need anything more than that. It's a great introduction into the KitchenAid world. The basic classic machine is a great introductory piece. Now, moving on to the K5SS here, this is a little bit more equipped for, doing some heavier doughs, a little bit more commercial stuff. If you're going to do a lot of cinnamon rolls or bread, this really does a better job of handling those heavier doughs than the Artisan or the other tilt heads do. Not that they don't do a good job, but this is the way to go if you know for a fact that you're going to be doing some more heavier doughs. Now, there are not a ton of upgrades that we actually do to these K5SS because they really don't need them, but one way that we do spruce them up a little bit, we like to put on our comfy grip right here. It just really helps improve the aesthetic of the machine, makes it a little bit more of a comfortable grip, hence the name comfy grip. If you have arthritis in your hands or things like that, it gives you a little bit better gripping surface than that little tiny, arm lever here. So that's just something we like to add to the machines. All right, moving right along, let's get into the Professional 600 and the ProLine 7-quart machine. Now, at first glance, you would think that these machines are exactly the same, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Let's take a look. So first off, we have the Professional 600 here. Now, the 600 means that it has a 6-quart bowl. They have a Professional Pro 5 Plus, which is going to be the exact same thing as the Professional 600, except for it's going to have a 5-quart bowl. They're going to use the same exact attachments and paddles. Everything's going to be the same size on those. The bowls are actually interchangeable, so you can move the 6-quart to the 5-quart, the 5-quart to the 6-quart. And the cool thing is that the ProLine 7-quart here generally has a 7-quart bowl, but you can actually take the 5 and 6-quart bowl as well and put that on the 7-quart machine. I will say it is very nice and handy that they made all of that interchangeable, because if you have both of these models, it just makes it really easy for cohesiveness, to use all of your different attachments and bowls, amongst all of your units. Now, one of the biggest differences between the ProLine 7-quart and the Professional 600 Pro 5 Plus is that the ProLine 7 and also the commercial 8-quart machine all have a DC powered motor. Now take a listen to that. It's pretty quiet, right? It stays pretty quiet throughout all the speeds. Sounds really good. Now we move to the 6-quart machine here, noticeably louder. And that's one of the biggest complaints we get with these machines is that, they just start to sound like a jet engine. Now let's take a look at the pros and cons between these two machines here. Now, one of the pros, I think, is that the 7-quart and the 8-quart machine, they both have a planetary that also has a pin that you just punch out to remove the planetary. As opposed to the Pro 600 Pro 5 Plus, there is no pin here. The only way that you can get this planetary out is actually by, going in from the top, removing this top piece, which we'll do in just a second, and removing a bunch of the gears and then pulling the planetary out from the bottom. Makes it a little bit harder to add, some of the upgrades. Like we like to put the spring and washers on these as well. But not only that, since this model does not have a pin that holds that planetary in place, there is kind of a little bit of a problem there. So this is the same planetary that would go up into the Professional 600 Pro 5 Plus machine, and you see there is no pin in that. Now if you look, this planetary shaft, it's leaning a little bit to the right. And since there is no pin, this shaft is actually just pressed down into place, and there's some little splines in there that hold it into place. Well, as you can see, it is leaning one way a little bit, and that's because it started to lose its pressing. And when these mixers lose their pressing, since there's no pin to hold it in place, this whole planetary piece can actually just fall away down into the bowl. Now, that's definitely not a deal breaker because this takes like 10 years at least for this to happen. Heavy use, but it does happen, and these things are kind of expensive. They're about $75 a piece to replace, but everything on these machines are replaceable, so we can just keep them running forever. So I've gone ahead and opened up the Pro 600 and the Proline 7-quart to show you a side-by-side here. As you can tell, they do look very similar without the tops removed, but once you remove the tops, they have a completely different drive system. So the Pro 600, Pro 5 Plus, they come with an AC motor, and it's 575 watts, as opposed to the Proline 7-quart and the 8-quart machine. They come with a 1.3 horsepower DC motor. Now let's go ahead and remove the transmission here. I did remove some screws already, but this is what those internals look like here. It's a pretty good system. We do have some issues right here. So this is a floating worm gear, so it can kind of make some noise. It bounces around a little bit. It'll make a knock while mixing heavy doughs. Not overly concerning. Now, moving on to the actual, the worm follower gear here, which is underneath what they call the bevel gear. So this worm follower gear down here, that's another thing that we see strip out on these machines. And that is because, like the tilt heads, that worm follower gear there is not steel like the rest of the gears. It is a anodized brass and copper mixture. And so it's still really strong. It's metal, but it is also designed to strip out under too heavy of a load. But that being said, it can do a ton of work. One other problem issue we see is this board right here. So one of the only air ports on this machine is actually right where this board sits. And so it sucks flour into the machine while this fan is running back here, right? It sucks it in, kind of gunks this board up, causes it to short out. What'll happen is, you'll go to increase the speeds. It won't want to turn on. You'll have to wiggle the switch to get it to engage in different speeds. And again, it's not something that's going to fail overnight. It takes, years and years of use to actually, run into these issues. But again, it's a little bit more expensive, right? This is also an $85 part. The good thing about these Pro 600s and Pro 5 Pluses is that they're very, very easy to maintain and repair on your own. It's just a few clips on this board. If it goes bad, a couple screws, you just pop those off, pop the new ones in. Very easy. Now for the Proline machine here, so I'm actually not even going to open this up. So this is the motor right here, and then in here is a little transmission housing. So there's a bunch of gears in there, and then there's two big gears up here. And the reason I'm not going to disassemble that and show you is because honestly, you cannot get the individual gears anyway, so you don't even need to see them. That is really one of the only drawbacks about the 7 and 8 quart machines is that if the gears fail or the motor fails, you actually have to replace this entire motor and transmission unit. And that can be a couple $100. It is a very powerful and quiet machine, so it isn't a bad choice, but it does come with a cost, right? So this machine is like $700. This machine is like $400. Now, all of this being said, they actually did just discontinue this 7-quart machine. They reintroduced another 7-quart machine, but it has an AC motor like the Pro 600. I haven't had a chance to get my hands on one of those yet to really see the quality and see how well they run, if they're any louder than this one is or not. But they've made some changes to the line in literally like just the last few weeks. Now, personally, I don't think you can go wrong with either of these machines, right? One of them is going to be, a little bit more powerful, probably last a little bit longer in the grand scheme, but it comes at a more expensive price to where the Pro 600, you'll get, like I said, at least 10 years out of it, and it's a lot cheaper to repair and replace the parts when the time comes. Now, for the question of, is one of these machines the right machine for you? Well, let's talk about it. So as you saw when we disassembled, there is a little bit of a difference in motor size and bowl capacity, right? You got a 6-quart and a 7-quart. So if you have a really large family and you're going to be doing a lot of heavier doughs and be using your machine really hard, maybe the 7-quart's the way to go, but you really can't go wrong with the 6-quart either. It has a nice bowl capacity. And as we talked about, it is a little bit cheaper to maintain and just keep alive. Both the Pro 600 and the Pro 5 Plus and the 7-quart are all going to be marketed to people, honestly, who are doing bigger batches. Like I said, have larger families, right? If you got 5, 6, 7 people in your family, you're going to want to go with one of the larger capacity machines. They can just handle a little bit more, and they definitely do better with things like dough, cinnamon rolls, breads, things of that nature. They had all metal gears, right? So they hold up just a little bit longer and a little bit better when you're doing heavy batches. All right, so let's just do a little recap here while we got them all on the table. So again, the Classic, it's a great starter piece. If you need an introduction to the KitchenAid mixer, it's great. It's a cheaper unit, right? They come in at about $300. They're sturdy, they're powerful, they can do light duty breads and things like that. You don't want to overdo the bread on these because, like I said, you can strip out those gears. But generally, they're just very good for people who want to do cookies, cakes, batters, icings, things of that nature. Then we move into the K5SS here. It's also going to do well with all of the aforementioned stuff here. It's a little bit better with the dough because there's less moving parts. This head can't get rattled loose. It's all affixed to the base. So it does a little bit better job handling stiffer doughs. And then, obviously 5-quart bowl here. The Classic, like I said, is a 4.5 quart. The Artisan is the 5-quart. K5SS is a 5-quart. And then you move into the Pro 600 here. As we talked about, it's going to be a little better for people who are doing more heavier doughs. They know they're going to be making cinnamon rolls and tamales and things of that nature that would beat up machines like this. They do a little bit better job of holding up to those thicker doughs. And then lastly, the 7-quart, the big mamma jamma here. It's going to have the 7-quart bowl, the larger capacity bowl. So if you got the big family, right, that might be the best choice for you. It's also going to handle all of your doughs and everything of that nature, better than any of them probably, but very solid unit. At the end of the day, you cannot really choose a wrong machine. It all basically is just determined by your baking style and your preference, right? Some people just like the tilt head function better. It's easy for them to move up and down. Some people like the bowl raise better. A lot of that seems to depend on what you were raised with or what your first machine was. Is generally, people's first impression of it is, oh, this is my favorite one. Well, that's because that's the first one that you had. But they are all great units. You can't go wrong either way. And we can keep these things alive forever. So no matter what you choose, we're going to be able to fix it if it does break. And, if you're looking for a machine, like I said, we do have all of these in stock. So make sure to check out our website. As always, thank you so much for watching. Now, hopefully this video did what it was intended to do, and that was to make you an informed buyer. Now, like I said, no matter which machine you choose, you can't go wrong. If you are looking for a machine, we do have them available. So make sure to check out our website, mrmixer.store. And we also have a whole bunch of different accessories and other little things, parts, anything you need to keep your machine alive forever. We can definitely do that for you. Make sure to give us a like and a follow, and we'll see you next time.